I'm I'm Ron Kavanaugh, the executive director of the Literary Freedom Project. The Literary Freedom Project is a Bronx-based nonprofit really focused on books, culture, and education, specifically here in the Bronx. We present programs um, like this one book, one Bronx, but we also we do an annual literary conference, and we create lesson plans and workshops for educators all around elevating the culture of the people of the South Bronx, people of the Bronx, people of the South Bronx. We're primarily focused on Black and Brown people, all genres of books, fiction, nonfiction, poetry. We host literary events from time to time. But the book club, One Book, One Bronx, is really a space where we can all kind of come together. Now on Zoom, we normally meet in person at two locations, Bronx Art Space and the Casita Maria Center for Arts and Education. And what we do in those spaces, one, obviously we talk about books, but the greater goal is to use books as a way to talk about greater issues. Issues related to social justice, gentrification, women empowerment, politics. So that's what we do in this book club. You come here, we welcome everyone. You can talk about the book, but you do not have to talk about the book. If you want to talk about something just related to the subject matter of the book, by all means. We don't want you to be bound by the book. We want you to express who you are and how you see yourself sort of navigating this book club. It is not about what I say, it's really about what you bring to the book club. So yeah, if you just want to come in and chill out and not say anything, we welcome that. If you come in and you want to chat for the whole hour and a half, we probably won't allow that, but we will allow you to go on and make your point and talk about the things and the subjects that you are really interested in talking about. So with that, I want to introduce one of our partners, Casita Maria Center for Arts and Education. We partnered with them almost a year ago to the day to do book clubs in their space in the Hunts Point section of the Bronx. And their program director, I believe that's your title, Gail.
You can Director of Creative Arts Programs.
There you go. But she's here representing Casita Maria, and she'll say a few words about their center and tonight's book club. Hey, Gail.
Okay, thanks, Ron. And I'm thrilled to see so many readers this evening. This is wonderful. So I wanted to also extend a welcome to Casita Maria and Literary Freedom's Project's virtual book club. As Ron said, my name's Gail Heidel. I've been at Casita Maria for about 5 years now, and I'm really thrilled that in this last year we've included in our programs this book club. We would normally be meeting in person in our gallery, and where we would be in discussion surrounded by celebratory artwork. And this season that this specific book is part of a larger season that's called Brotherhood. And during this season of programming, we'll be presenting performances and additional free public programs like this one. And our hope is that we'll be creating nurturing and celebratory spaces, offering time for reflection and dialogue around what brotherhood means and how we as a community can embrace and celebrate a philosophy of acting with warmth and equality towards one another, regardless of any differences. The exhibition that I was hoping that we would all be, sitting and reflecting upon will be opening up on October 8th at the Casita Maria Gallery. So if you are interested in visiting the artwork in person, we are receiving visitors. And you could also view it virtually on our website, probably around mid-October. So I've put our website in the chat. If you want to go to the very top of the chat, it's casitamaria.org. You want to go specifically to the gallery, it's /gallery. And you can also learn more about Casita Maria and our long history. We were actually founded in 1934 in East Harlem and then moved to the Bronx in the 60s. We have an after-school program where we serve over 1,000 young people, ages K through 12, and then there's additional programming through creative arts that include both visual and performing arts events and workshops. And the last thing that I want to mention before I pass things off to Ron is also at the top of the chat is a link to the New York City Public Library where you can download free books. So if you haven't purchased the book, there's a possibility that it would be available for download through their e-reader app, which is called Simply E. So you can either go to the App Store or you can go to the Public Library website. I just wanted to provide that as a resource. And I'll pass it back to you, Ron.
Thank you so much. So I'm almost ready to introduce Brandon, but one of the things we want to do in this space is build community. You know, if you participate in this book club, that's great. It's more important to me that you just participate in some kind of community that is greater than yourself. And a couple of people, Regina already sort of introduced herself, but Barbara, she recently started a book club. So she joined our book club last month. It was her first book club ever in the history of Barbara. And she decided to start her own book club. So I just want her to say a couple words about what she's doing with her book club and how you guys can join her. Barbara?
Hi, thank you, Ron. My name is Barbara. And as Ron said, the first time that I was even part of a book club was Ron's book club last month, I believe.
Yeah.
And I was so saddened that he had, I mean, it was the first time that I even knew about book clubs, but I was kind of sad when I didn't see a schedule for August. So I had inquired and he said, oh no, we take the summer off. So I kind of made a joke like, oh wow, how dare you? I started this book club, you introduced me to something so exciting and then there's no book club. So I said, you know what, why don't I just host my own book club? And we did. It was a first book club. It just ended about 2 weeks ago. We read Toni Morrison's God Help the Child. It was a very nice, quick, easy read. And then I figured, you know what? I just want to keep it going. I like it. I like the way it felt. Ron has been in constant communication with me. He's been inspiring me to move forward. And I really liked it. And I think that it's definitely a community that brings us together and doing everything that we love to do, which is read. And I just want to keep going. So if you guys are interested, my next book club starts next week, Tuesday, September 22nd. And it runs for 4 weeks and it will be reading Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. It's a collection of short stories and I'm happy to put it in the chat room for anybody that's interested. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. So I know I'm introducing a lot of people, but Journey is here. Journey looked like she's about 10 years old now. So this is
right? Right? Journey's about to go to college.
So Jessica is one of our longtime book club members. She had a baby, and I saw the baby was driving a car.
Really, Ron?
Last month, but I just want to acknowledge Jess and Journey, because Journey is just getting so big.
She is. She's 4.5 months now. She was born.
Just 4.5 months, and she's talking.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I definitely just want to give a shout out to Journey. So that's it. No more talking from me. Brandon. So Brandon Janice is the actual facilitator. You wouldn't know it by the amount of talking that I've just done, but she's the actual facilitator, and she's going to be leading the conversation for the rest of the evening. So thank you all so much for coming. Look at Liliana's back. Wow, this is like a family reunion. So thank you so much, Brandon.
Good evening, everyone. Y'all look so good. I'm so excited. This is such a great turnout. You know, I didn't grow up in New York. I'm from Michigan. That's where I was born and raised. But I have family here, so I would come to New York all the time when I was a kid. And I moved here like right when I graduated high school. However, there's something about even just these first 47 pages that I think show me a New York that if you are not from New York, it's terribly difficult to describe, right? I think there are a lot of transplants, especially like in Brooklyn nowadays, that would describe a completely different New York than what is in these pages. And that's kind of how I wanted to open the conversation. More specifically about the language in these pages. There's no, I mean, like tricky language. The author isn't trying to trick us with a bunch of big words or anything like that. But the language is so conversational that I had to go back and read some things a couple of times and read them out loud. And then when I started to do that, I found myself doing it in different voices, like I was reading to a kid for some reason, like a New Yorican accent. I don't know if anyone else like heard the voices in their heads. And I think that's because the language in these pages is so conversational. Like very New York, very quick. There are even some times where the writer, especially when he's writing Sappho's dialogue, he writes it how he would say it. For example, on page 19, he's talking about Hunter College, but he spells it H-U-N-T-A, Hunter, like Sappho would say Hunter, right? I think there is something very magical for me about that. Like, did anyone else kind of get that feeling of like being brought into the world, not necessarily off of the scenes, that these like beautiful, very descriptive scenes that the author is writing, but really being in the world from the language alone? Am I the only one who thought that?
That's a very New York accent. That's a very New York phrase. We do kind of leave off the ERs, and it is Hunter. And I heard one person tell me, New York is, we don't walk, we walk, we talk. So we're very hard with those consonants. So that was very New York of the writing, right? Definitely a New York writing style.
Yes.
Yes. And I live in, it's so funny because I live in Spanish Harlem. So it was good for me to kind of get that feel of Spanish Harlem back in the day and do that, compare and contrast from then to now. So yeah, it was kind of nice.
Yeah.
And I think Brandon,
I felt really comfortable reading it because it had that authentic New York accent in it. Like it flowed so beautifully and poetically. And yeah, like you said, Sappho had that accent, and like every time he talks, it's like Hunter and this and that. I did have to stop, and I was like, wait a minute, like, oh nah, this is how he says it. And like you said, you adapt that lingo with him. Like you make voices to, I don't know, I felt comfortable reading, and I kind of read it out loud every time he spoke.
and Brendan, Yeah, I also want to comment on something you said about how you know, that part of town is not the same as it was in 70s or 80s, and that's right. It's much more gentrified these days. So that's, you know, a good point as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought honestly when I started, hi everyone, my name's Karina. I'm really happy to be here. I'm from the Bronx originally. I grew up in the South Bronx. And when I read this, when I'll be honest, I didn't finish the whole 47 pages. But when I literally the second page that I read, was it this? Yeah, the second page that I read, I'm like, I need to send this to my brother who's right now in Rikers, who you know, who talks like that, who talks like Sapo, who was Sapo, right? And you know, and your point, Brandon, about like getting immersed in it, and it wasn't just it definitely got immersed. I had to reread certain sections because I would just be like just kind of casually reading along with his internal dialogue, what he's going through right in his head as he's. So for example, I'm looking at page 4 and he starts talking about like fighting in school. And he's talking about it pretty like casually almost, that I would miss the intern, like why I'm fighting in school, because I hate myself, because everyone around me doesn't care for me, my teachers don't care for me, I hate myself. He says it so casually that I had to really go back and read it again. And when I read it, to your point about reading it in different voices, I read it from my brother's voice, my brother's perspective, who, you know, when I grew up, and I don't want to take up too much time, but when I grew up, I heard a lot about being gifted in school, right? There was something about, I don't know, maybe it was me being a girl or whatever, but me and my brother were both the same, personality-wise and intellectual-wise, right? But he got branded as this bad kid that the teachers couldn't bothering with, right? And so, you know, it was always, you know, he says on page 4, it was always easy to get into fights if you hated yourself. You know, so what if I fought a guy bigger than you that would kick your ass? Like, you wouldn't read that in something that, you know, I'm gonna be frank, like you're not gonna read that in a standard conventional, you know, I'm gonna be frank, a white person probably wouldn't write it like that, right? Like if you're reading one of the classics, you're never gonna see something talking about like, you know, I'll kick your ass. But I think that speaks to, and I think the way he breaks, the way he sleeps into the slang and all that, like the natural language, it speaks to who he's writing this for. Like he's writing this for us. He wants us to read it. And to your point about like, if you're not from here, you're not gonna get it. And I think that that's so important, because there's nobody really trying to speak to my brother in a literary sense, or I don't think my brother. And that's why the first thing I thought was like, yo, I want every man in my Puerto Rican family who was walking around trying to start fights to either begin their life. He said it so poignantly. He said they think that they need this fight to either begin or end their life. Like,
yes,
I feel like that's something I really wanted to talk about, was like, that's what's going on. I feel like even today I have cousins, male younger cousins, who are wrapped up in that idea of needing to assert their manhood through violence somehow, or protect their respect or honor somehow through that. And it just speaks to how much is going on inside. And I feel like, I'm sorry I took up so much time, but like, whew, it was mind-blowing. I wonder what anyone else might have thought about that.
You definitely didn't take up too much time. Thank you for that. That was really beautiful. And other people to jump in too. But just one thing I have to kind of also say to your point, like not only did he say, it stuck with me when Chino kept saying that he hated himself in the beginning, but he also kept saying how ugly he was. Did anyone else catch on that, and how ugly Sapo was? He's like, he really did look like a frog. He's like, who cares if someone breaks my nose? I'm ugly anyway. It was the casualness of almost dismissing their whole lives that someone that is not from the projects in the Bronx, my first thing was when I read him say, your life means shit from the start. I was like, no, it's okay. You can, like, I was really like literally encouraging this man in the pages. And you know why? It's because that he is quite, like, I identify with this and I can read it in full. But I think to Karina's point, he's not talking to me, right? He's not talking to me. He's talking to the other Chinos of the Bronx.
I just wanted to say one thing about the language. Like, I did like that. I do like the fact that he kind of shows you each character through their language, you know, and the way he writes it differently. but I feel like it's for, is it Janice or Brendan is your first name?
My name's Brandon, yeah.
Brandon, okay. So I just feel like how you said that when you started reading it was like, oh, that's how Sappho would talk. And I feel like that was exactly why he did it that way. So not really for us New Yorkers. I am born and raised in New York from the Bronx, but it's not for us. I feel like when I was reading this, even if he didn't write it that way, I would be like, Sappho would say Hunter. Sappho would say with you, you know? So I feel like it is so that people who are not from around here will know exactly how it's supposed to be said, how Sappho spoke, and the differences between how he spoke and Blanca, for example, you know?
Right.
So very good use of language on his part, I think, to really set the stage and for characterization. So yeah, I appreciated that.
Well, the language is
That's it.
important because when my daughter just came from Washington State, she told me, "Ma, have you heard of this woman called Jessica Bombalera? She's a professor in the state, Washington State University, and she was from Kansas. She was a Jewish woman from Kansas, and oh man, you never heard of her?
Is she the one that they found out she was going around saying she was Afro-Puerto Rican? They found out that was a lie.
Yes.
Black studies at the university, and she went around talking like, you know,
She pretended that she was black and
pretended she was a Black Puerto Rican from the Bronx.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the
My
second
daughter told me
story.
about that. I was like, oh my God. So
That
we're
was
popular.
the second
We are
story. She
popular.
said first she said that she was part Tuareg from North Africa. And then her story became that she was Afro-Latina from Puerto Rico, whatever. So I was like, yeah, she was all over the place trying to see which story would stick. But when I saw the video, there's a video floating around on Twitter of her talking in YouTube about gentrification or something. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This was supposed to be her Bronx Afro-Latina accent because it was crazy. It was all over the place. I was like, no. I wish I would have spoken. I would have been like, where in Missouri are you from? Because you ain't from here.
And the name, Jessica La Bombalera. Come on, man. It's like,
Yeah,
but-
the name is even more offensive actually than the action.
Yeah,
But
but
I actually have to agree with you on that, Anna. Absolutely.
that's what happened. We're popular, so there. Now, I'm from a different generation. When I read the book, it took me back to my childhood. I was born in the South.
Anna, I just want to let you know that you're breaking up.
I don't have pages, so I don't know if I overread.
So
What round is it?
Yeah, so tonight we were talking about pages 1 through 47.
Yeah, but I don't have page
what
numbers.
chapters?
Oh, all right.
What round is it?
Where we read up
think
to
it was-
round 6.
Yeah.
Round 6. Okay.
Yeah, round 6. Okay, I read it. Oh, okay.
Did anyone want to add anything else kind of about the language? Because I have one other thing I kind of want to introduce.
So I did.
I want to say something. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I do the audiobook, and one thing that I really appreciated was the narrator used different voices for every character. It's not Enriquez that narrated the book, but he uses a different he uses a different voice for Sal and a different voice for Jessica and all of them, and so it's you get to actually almost picture what they sound like, and kind of put a face to the voice almost. You know, I'm sure they spoke about, you guys have read with when they're talking about Bodega too in the garage or wherever they're meeting. But yeah, so he even uses, no, the author is not reading the audiobook. No.
No, I'm using the audiobook too, Heather, and it's so much fun to listen to because every character has this voice, and it's so different. Like I could hear Sapo. He sounds like my dead uncles. He sounds like the guy who works in the bodega. He sounds like two kids I met in high school. He sounds like kids I teach. So I get it. It's a lot of fun to listen to it.
I grew up in the, I just wanted to say that I appreciated the authenticity of the writing. I grew up in that era, and it's, it was very, it made me feel something that I could identify with when he talked about the Perry Thomas down these mean streets. I had to read that in 7th grade when they're talking about the funeral, and he, oh, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I read the whole book. It was so good, but just the way that that he references, you know, the young lords. I was around for the garbage strikes and when they took over the church. I was a little girl, but you know, I knew what was going on. So the authenticity of it was just really gripping for me.
Yes, the same here. And kind of to that point, Linda, I wanted to introduce this. When you're talking about authenticity, for me, in the first, 47 pages, one of the most, outside of the language, one of the most authentic things for me in the writing was the speed. The speed of how fast not only the writer was kind of getting through, from middle school to elementary school to adulthood to marriage to baby, like that, uptown rushness, like the hurry of uptown. Like I felt that almost in every single page, like a rush to get to the rush. I think there's something like so quick, like a New York minute that was in almost every single line.
That sense of urgency. Urgency, that yes, you could definitely feel that. And even the 2 tracks, I mean, you always, I think it's still true today, you have the track of the good girl Blanca, but she, she's the one who's keeping everybody on the straight and narrow. You have even his mom who's talking about, I don't want you hanging out with that sapo. We all had a sapo, that our moms hated, whether it was a boy or a girl that your mom just really wished you just did not hang around with.
This is so interesting to me because the one thing that he wrote about Sapo in the early on was like, I think his mom was like, oh, I don't want you hanging around him. And he's like, I didn't care because Sapo meant adventure. Like Sapo, like that guy, not afraid of life, like totally ready to live. And there's something just so admirable about that to me. But as I kind of continue to read, I'm like, Sapo is like actually a grade A jerk. Like I don't like him, not even a little bit. And I can't, it doesn't have anything to do with like his upbringing. It doesn't have anything to do with like what he does for a living. It's really just kind of the way he treats people. I don't know.
He's a user. And Blanca even says, he may be your friend, but his friends are not your friends. She sees him for what he's a user. Sure, he can be that friend and he can represent that adventure, but he's a user and he's always going to look out for himself.
He's a street guy, yeah. He's from the street.
Yeah, you know what? I thought of Sapo. I don't know if y'all have ever watched Atlanta, Donald Glover's show. He reminds me of Paperboy's homeboy, who's always like, everything he does is kind of off. It's like he has his own, like y'all said, his own ulterior motive. But like even the way that he was talking to Chino about him liking Blanca, to me, I kind of appreciated that a little bit because I felt like he was a little bit more clear. You know what I'm saying? Like he knew what he wanted. He knew that like, oh, it's not about, just say that you like her, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, when I think about my friends in high school and middle school or whatever the case may be, like nobody was clear, you know what I'm saying? Nobody really knew what they wanted or what their motives were really about, you know what I'm saying? Oh, she's so smart, she's so cool, she's so this and she's so that. But it's like, no, you really just like her. So, I mean, even though, our sapos in our lives, you know what I'm saying? They might be wilding out and doing all kind of crazy stuff, but at the same time, those kids are always more smarter. You know what I'm saying? Like, they might have, you know, like that dirtiness that goes on, but they're always wiser. They're always smarter. They've always seen more than the rest of us have. You know what I'm saying? And of course, it comes from a standpoint of being involved in, you know, no one knows what the home life looks like, you know, and all that other stuff. But I always have an appreciation for them because I know, like, y'all know something, you know?
And I can agree with you on every single portion of that. And that's where I was with Sapo until page 27, when he says, like, when they're talking about little girls or just women in general, and he's like, oh, I could take them 8 to 80. If she can play with Fisher Price, she can play with this. That's when I was like, oh, wait, no, Sapo, you are off my list. I cannot defend you anymore. Like, I don't, there's something about him that is beyond that level of intellect that all, you know, street dudes have usually. There's something about him that's, I don't know, a little more demonic to me.
Anna Martinez said cringeworthy, and I thought every character in this book outside of Blanca was cringeworthy.
Really?
Yes. It's I mean, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, and
You're entitled to it. Well,
I guess we all, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of that toxic masculinity, which, I mean, to Batasha's point,
I think we lost Magda.
Martha,
oh, no, I'm
there?
here. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
did I cut into your comment?
No, she muted.
No. It muted on my end. You're good.
No, so please continue. You didn't finish your point.
But you jumped right on it. There was toxic masculinity, and I think that it came from a white patriarchal Hispanic male chauvinist point of view. Especially how they talk about the women. So for example, Blanca, I knew from jump, just based off of her name, that how she looked, especially like when they talked about him and how he was like from Salvador, and that's the reason why they called him Chino. And then her sister, oddly enough, because she's like not so, doesn't make popular opinions, she's called Negra. And so I don't know, it's just, this book is hitting me very different than everyone else. And so I was very careful to be like, okay, maybe you shouldn't say anything, but every time any character, especially the male characters, spoke, and I have the audio book, and I don't agree with everyone that it sounds authentic. I think he sounds like a, and I'm sorry, it sounds like a Tony Montana from Scarface.
Like a bombera.
Yeah, like it just, that to me didn't sound authentic in terms of where I grew up, and I grew up in the Bronx, and you know, like it just, I don't know. It just, this whole book is hitting me different. I do appreciate the language that they're using and what they're talking about in the historical context, but I think all the characters, including Sapo, because of that Fisher Price comment, are just, you know, like, I mean, Bodega is talking about exploiting his own people and essentially starting, you know, like not capitalism, I forget the word that, but he's gonna exploit the people in the community, and he has a God complex.
He's a gentrifier. He wants to be a gentrifier.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about Bodega. Let's talk about
He has like those political pimping kind of qualities, I feel.
Yeah.
You know how politicians have that quality, some of them, to be like pimping their neighborhoods. That's what I feel like he's doing. And I agree with Marta to a certain extent. I do feel like most of the characters are kind of creepy. They all have their own agenda, including Blanca. I think she perpetuates that whole stereotype with her sister, Negra. You know, she's the good, clean one. And because Negra has a different opinion about things and she handles things differently, she's the bad one. She's Negra. So I kind of get where she's coming from.
What do you guys feel about the idea that there are so many of these different characters, but they are all living in the same place, like including Blanca, like including Sapo, like that idea of somebody who can be as nice or polite, church going as Blanca, and then somebody who can be the complete opposite, like Sapo, can live in the same building and live the same life. There's something about that kind of stuck, the class divide of New York, right? That's what it is. That is it. And it kind of stuck out to me on the pages. And so when Bodega was finally introduced, I think not even until like the third or fourth round he was introduced, I think like he came on, that's so funny you say as a gentrifier, Ron, because I think I was like on his side. Was I the only one? I think I was on his side for a lot of the times, especially when he was talking about how he bought a building and put 14 families in it, and the rent was low, and now he has 14 families that are going to riot for him. Right. He sounds like some sort of Robin Hood. And on top of that, he felt that feeling of being the underdog when the cops would drive by and like laugh at them, you know? So there's something about him that is very intriguing to me. If you're willing to get your hands dirty, you can like actually make some sort of difference. I don't know. Was I the only one who was down with Bodega?
Is he also a drug dealer, or is he just, you know, he's using his money to help the community? So, you know, it's tit for tat. Politicians do it every day. Priests do it. Father Giganti, when I grew up, there was Father Giganti, who I didn't know this, but he ran the neighborhood.
Yep.
And his brother, the Chin.
His brother was in the mafia.
Yes, I remember.
So it's real. This is all real. I don't know about anybody else, but I grew up in that kind of environment. And there was the nice little girl from Puerto Rico, I mean, who lived in the building, and she was light-skinned, and all of a sudden she disappeared. Why? Because she got pregnant and they sent her to Puerto Rico. And it was a class thing, you know. There were people who had money, and there were people who didn't. They lived in the same building. You had the drug dealers in the corner. They were your friends. And it was like, you know, it's real. To me, this story is real. There's no phoniness about it. I don't want to listen to the narrator because now I'm turned off by the audio. But, you know, in my own head, you know, so I like Bodega. So far, I like Bodega. I like Sapo. I like them all.
Me too.
I'm not crazy about Blanca.
Bodega has like a survival of the fittest kind of mentality, I think.
He's a young lord.
It's funny, we read this book, a long time ago. And that was the thing too, like I never really liked Blanca either. You know, she was like the best character, but she was like the most annoying. So I'm glad to hear like
you know why I think that she was the most, I liked her, but you know why I think I can understand why in this story, in these pages, she's annoying because she's the only one not really standing up, taking a risk, and ready to survive by any means necessary. She's doing exactly what she's supposed to do, what somebody else told her to do. And she's the only one who's not really thinking like 10 or 20 steps ahead. She's kind of just taking life as it goes and going to Hunter and marrying a guy she's known forever. She's the only one not really like trying.
Yeah, because she's privileged. She's still privileged, even though she's in the hood. She's still privileged. The fact that they were paying for their own education out of pocket says a lot in itself.
Don't be fooled by Blanca, because she, you know, there was something that she said, I guess, I don't know what page, but she said, just because I go to church doesn't mean that I don't know what's going on in the neighborhood. So when she's trying to get her church woman to find a husband for her immigration. So I don't think that she is stupid. Like she knows what's going on. She knows what's up, what the neighborhood kids are all about.
And she knows Sapo and Chino are up to something.
She's not so innocent.
Yeah.
She's not that innocent. Yes. Yes.
She's not.
But you know, she never said she was. We as the reader made her out to be that, and then we're disappointed when we find out that, you know, she's she's just maybe a little smarter than the other people. But she knows, because she does have a, I mean, she went on, she decided she was going to go to Hunter. That was a big, deciding to continue on to school in that environment is a big deal.
So I would like to say, oh, I'm sorry. I would like to, you know, I thought, as all you people, everybody has said about the conversation, but I'm really curious to find out who Vera is. So for me, you know, as I was reading, I don't speak Spanish, but I'm always with my girlfriend who speaks Spanish. So when I was reading it at first, I was like, oh, I wish she was here to, you know, tell me what they're really saying. And I really envisioned my friend really reading it in Spanish. Like, this was like a perfect book for her in a sense. So when I saw that, but I'm really curious of the turn of how the ending of it was with Veronica. And I'm curious to see how that translates to seeing, you know, because Blanca kind of like shied away. Like, I don't want to talk about, I never even met her. And the way Bodega kind of said, ask her about who Vera is. So I'm kind of interested in that, that turnaround of the story.
If she's playing dumb, she doesn't know Vera. Like, that was my thing. I don't know if she's just like playing it.
Okay.
Well, I think Blanca, I mean, she's pregnant, so she wants the best for her child. She's married, she wants the best for that marriage, and she's going to school, and I admire all these things, you know, that she's really trying to, you know, step above where she was, you know, or where she is. So, you know, and she could be a little self-righteous, but, you know, but I think that she's really reaching out there to better herself. And so I admire that part.
Yeah. I was wondering what was the significance, because Vera was mentioned earlier. I can't find the page now, but she was mentioned earlier when he was kind of going through names and the significance of having a nickname in the neighborhood. And it couldn't be a nickname that was a family nickname. It had to be a nickname that you earned, something that you fought for. And I want to say he mentioned Vera, or maybe Blanca mentioned Vera, as people changing their names to fit some sort of portfolio once they reach adulthood. Some people change Juan to John, things like that.
Vera would be a very simple Veronica, but their names meant more. Like Sapo, he looked like a little tadpole. Chino, he, you know, and it's, I know these names because, you know, back then we had them. Our parents gave us names, like I was called Tata, but then you had a street name. And that's how the family that you had in the street would know you. So Vera was like, Veronica, yeah, that's it. No significance, but we'll see later. I want to ask Ron, when I continue, can you just in the emails just say what the name of the chapters? I don't have pages.
Yeah, I understand.
So
I'll do that.
Just around, or you know.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Yeah. So did we have to reach up round 6 or? Because I read.
We read up to round 6. So
yeah, I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, so we just read 1 through 5, rounds 1 through 5.
And the next 6 through.
Is book 2 the next, what we're reading? Book 2 is what we're reading next? Because they're coming, it comes in books, right? He's like book 1, how men were raised in the streets. Then book 2 is something else.
No, it's because.
So I just have rounds, but we can discuss this.
Okay, sorry.
I don't want to get too far off
because I don't want to talk more about what I read because I went beyond.
That's that. Even if you do that, it's fine.
No, because some people didn't read it. It's not fair. She wants to know about Vera. We mustn't tell.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate that, Anna. I really do.
No, I don't want to be no spoiler.
What do you think about the idea of like kind of Bodega's dream, if you will, of owning space in New York City.
That's real. That's so real. That's power, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like you think, I mean,
I
I'm just gonna leave it
admire
at that. I
that.
wonder what everybody else thinks about that.
What was the
I'm
question?
with you, Karina. I'm with it. I don't see how it's much different from the way anybody else does business.
You
I
want
like
a good piece of Manhattan too.
It's a cutthroat business, and people do a whole lot worse.
I like the way he says too. I'm gonna be the second biggest slumlord.
Who's ever is talking, I can't hear.
Heather, you're breaking up.
Yeah, somebody's breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I said I liked, and he was like, "I'm gonna be the second biggest slumlord, aside from the city of New York." You know, it goes to show that, yeah, I'm going to, you know, obviously he with the trash, I guess riots, or you know, the situation with that. But he not only does he call out New York, but then, like he says, he has blood war for him because of the conditions that he's helping them live in, and it's cheap, you know. And he goes, not because they love me, and he says it, not because they love me, but because I control their lives now.
Because they fear him.
And that says a lot. That's the power.
When did this take place?
And, you know,
what decade? I'm kind of lost.
The 80s?
It has to be the 80s, right? Because the Young Lords.
Right.
This is like post Young Lords.
This is post Young Lords.
I think it's in the 70s.
Maybe
No, the 70s, the Young
late
Lords were still
70s,
active.
early 80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like that point, Martha. I don't know what is better, having a slumlord that's your own people. We hear that phrase of like, it be your own people sometimes bringing you down or keeping you down. But I'm conflicted a little bit, and I wonder what everyone else thinks. I'm a little bit conflicted about all of the characters that we've said are problematic. So for example, like Sapo, yes, he's problematic, but if you notice how Chino describes him at the very beginning, he says, I want to be like him because he loves himself. Like, he's so sure of himself, right? And then you have someone like Bodega, who is absolutely problematic and exploiting his own people, but he's also, that's like the only model that he has for success, is like, you know, people taking advantage and exploiting his own people. So it's kind of like that survival of the fittest. I'm not justifying it. I don't think that's right. But at the same time, when you're thinking about like toxic masculinity, not having any examples of how to do it right, like, what is better? I don't. Is that even a, you know? I don't know. What is everyone?
Well, when I was reading it, I thought Bodega more was when he first initiated it, it came from a positive place. I really didn't see it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I honestly, I only read to page 47, and I'm all for Bodega. Now y'all got me wanting to read more. On page 40, I know that Chino says, Bodega might talk all this shit about helping the community and shit like that, but what it all comes down to is making money. And I felt like that's how I feel about him. Like he's doing this for the greater good in the beginning, but once he gets money hungry and he gets enough tenants in, he's gonna start putting the prices up, displacing people, being a gentrifier, getting them out, getting other people to come in. I don't know, like that's
Fire, gentrifier. Yes, that's exactly what. I'm sorry.
And then I like the quote. I mean, Sapo defends him, and do we trust Sapo or not? When he says, "No, bro, there are diamonds in that dog shit that he talks." You know, I like that quote a lot, but it's like it's still dog shit. Covered in diamonds. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. So I posed that question because at the beginning of the pages, Chino was describing him and Sapo playing in buildings that used to have tenants, and then they were set on fire, and then the city would come in and knock them down with a ball and chain, and then they just be parking lots, right? So it's this idea of like having space, building it, having community, and then not having anything, having it destroyed, right? And then that was kind of like at the beginning of the pages, and then towards the end, all we're talking about is owning space. All we're talking about is buildings in New York. All we're talking about is housing people. if that's what they claim they're trying to do. So like that idea, right, of like building something up, knowing very well that it may be destroyed, right? Building something to destroy. That's kind of how it feels. They're not doing this the right way. You know, they have like a shady lawyer who's naming the building like Harry Goldstein, or naming the company like a Jewish last name. Like, that's not your name, Bodega. You know, the whole setup is destructive from the beginning.
Yeah, but
there is something about it that is just so mysterious and so intriguing. So I wanted to kind of say that and see what you all thought.
I thought that one of the interesting parts of it is that he's talking about doing that in the same way that the father of the Kennedys did. I mean, to launder money and to get power in the way that is in the tradition of all kinds of people who have become very big figures in the society, right? He said, listen, they can do it, I can do it too, right? And I thought that was such a fascinating twist on this, and that the reason he was putting up his own community is so that he would get loyalty, like the mob bosses buy loyalty, right? It was really very interesting, I think.
Well, it was owned by the Italians at once, and the Italians left. So he's just following what the Italians
the same thing, right? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. That kind of building up to destroy, get your money and leave.
Maybe
right?
But there's also this mythology that you can eventually have a legitimate business from criminality, which never sort of materializes in the real world. But all of these sort of gangster types sort of go into this believing that, you know, they'll start cleaning, in quote, cleaning the money, and eventually that will lead to a legitimate empire.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Let's look in the White House right now.
But that's true.
Let's get serious, right? This is a guy who's been a crook and a gangster forever. Excuse the politics of it, but it's true. And he laundered himself all the way to the damn White House. It's like...
Exactly.
But I don't think he's alone, because this is a capitalistic society, you know. Yeah. And so Bodega is following capitalism.
Yes.
And every president, every senator. I mean, I'm just kind of cynical, you know.
Oh, that's right.
You know, they're capitalistic. Now, like when the young lords were around, they wanted to change this. They wanted to have, say more of a socialistic, you know, taking care of the people. But they didn't last because they weren't allowed to last. You know? But
the young lords did.
Bodega probably would be allowed to, you know, last. You know, because he's.
But the young lords talked about. But didn't the young lords talk about building up their communities? And he's very clearly stating that he's gonna grab those people by the balls and be like, if you don't do what I say, then pa la calle, like you were in the beginning. What is that? What the young lords? Was that the agenda for the young lords too? Because I know they talk about it, and he talks about and he glorifies them. But I think that his is skewed. What he wants to do is a little skewed and not quite as great as what the young lords were trying to do.
No. I think the young lords were going one way, and he's going another way. The young lords wanted to really, you know, have benefits for the community, unify the community. I mean, they fed the children, they had the schools, etc. You know, so.
We know organizations like that never are meant to last. We look at the Black Panthers, who were giving out free lunches and doing all kinds of stuff for the community, and they end up on FBI watch lists. So definitely not the route that, unfortunately, not the route that.
So we want Willie Bodega to be the president, right?
He is the president. Willie Bodega is the current president of the United States. Like,
I just have one question. What period are we talking about when this? I read the whole book, so it's kind of hard for me to interpret.
I did a Google search, and it said 1960s. Seems kind of early, but it says.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean,
It
Google, what did
says-
you Google though? What did
It says set Bodega Dream setting. It says set in New York City's Spanish Harlem, Bodega Dream centers around a charismatic former activist with the Young Lords in the 1960s named Willie Bodega.
That's what I'm
He
talking
was,
about.
that was when
No, the
he
60s is kind of early, I think.
It is.
That's what
I
I
mean,
felt.
there was
in the
some.
I think
When I was that, I felt like there was a part I had to kind of figure out what year, during or what era, and I saw the 90s. Is that just me?
Me too.
The 90s were mentioned.
Early 90s.
The 90s were mentioned also.
Okay.
So what is it? The 60s or the 90s?
I think it's the 90s because
I don't
there
think-
was.
I don't
I
think
mean, I
it's
was
the
checking out the
60s.
music. There
And-
was
or I
people gonna talk in, and it was like, okay.
If it was the 60s, it would be open admissions and they would be going to college for free.
Right.
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 I
It's
would
either
say
in the 70s or the 80s.
No.
So
Yeah,
we got to look up when the Young Lords were around, and it's right after that, right?
Right. The Young Lords were in the 60s, and I think where the
But
60s
wasn't he a member of the Lords? Wasn't it?
Right, he was
talked
a
about it
member of the
experience.
Lords in the He was a young lord in the 60s.
Right, and now it's in the
clearly
90s, and he's trying to create a community. He's trying to create his dream to have his people. I like Bodega. I'm sorry. You
Me
know?
too.
I like what he's trying to do. I think, and I can understand. The other day I was driving past Spanish Harlem, and I thought about the book, and I thought about, wow, what if somebody did actually accomplish something like that? I don't think he was evil, and I think he's very complicated. And even his relation when he spoke to Chino, Chino, his relationship with Chino was kind of strange. I mean, Chino didn't seem to have any fear when talking to him, you know. So there was something about him that was really cool, and he's smart too.
So there was also a movement in the Bronx and all the South Bronx where the people got together and they, I think, saved the Bronx, that certain people for progress or something like that. So maybe, you know, in that vein, but, you know, obviously wanting to make money. I'm for Willie. I don't care. Unless at the end he messes up.
But this is beautiful, right? Because this is like that kind of showing the beauty of the work, the beauty of the book, right? How the most complicated character can either be loved for that complexity or can be, you know, maybe he's not as complex as some people think. He's a bit more see-through, right? And his intentions. So I think like as we read, definitely our vibe and our thoughts will change on some of the characters. However, one thing that what time is it? It's 8 o'clock. Okay, one thing that I thought was really interesting and that I kind of wanted to offer was how Bodega kind of almost summoned Chino, right? We didn't even meet, but the name of the book is Bodega Dreams. We didn't even meet Bodega until, you know, well into the like halfway through the first little part. So I really thought it was interesting how everything that Bodega does is this power move. Even the simple idea of getting someone to talk to him that he wants to work with. He didn't really ask, you know, to work for him. He almost kind of told him. And that idea of those power dynamics, right, in this book amongst really all of the men is something I kind of wanted to offer into the space and see if anyone had any thoughts surrounding that just the idea of like how Willie Bodega commands everyone around him, not really asking, but telling. And is that the mentality that you need to survive? Is that the survival of the fittest mentality?
Was he demanding? I didn't find him demanding because I thought when he was speaking to, when Chino said, I don't want to be a part of it, he said there was a look of disappointment in his face. I didn't sense no bullyism. I didn't sense no Tony Soprano, you're going to do it or you're going to get screwed or whatever. I didn't get that from.
That's what I mean though, by that level of power that you don't have. You can look disappointed and that disappointment means that you are going to do it.
Well, that's true, but you know, was a kind of disappointed. Like he said, he had this look of disappointment. I mean, maybe it's the way I read it. I don't know. It's just,
sorry.
I just sensed that he was like, wow, I'm just going to have to work harder in order to get this guy on board. You can't just bully somebody to be a part of your team if they don't believe in it, you know? So he's got to figure a way to let this dude, an idiot. That's why I find him really interested and complicated. Really.
When they were talking about Bodega, like when they were describing him at first, they glorified like the Bodega. Like you don't know how many where he exactly lives because he has different location. Like even the place that they went to didn't have any furniture, So, and then again, like I think that it might be said like late. Like 80s or 90s, because when he's talking about the past, like he was part of it and now he's an older man, so he refers back to maybe the 60s when the young lords were rising and such, and now he's like in that age now that he wants to like own more about the community. But yeah, I have my mixed feelings about Bodega for sure. Like he's definitely problematic from the community. I can see that. And like having this God complex, that people need to owe to him. And people like, he's doing all of this so that later he can rest peacefully, whatever. He can summon people like he's doing with Sapo and now. And yeah, like he definitely has that complexity of him being the macho and the most powerful Bodega person.
I think also there's some sort of underlying love story between Vera and Willie Bodega, and so I'd be interested to see that. It's like one of the few lines that happen, I guess, in chapter 5, where Chino is in the bed with Blanca and they're talking, and he's like all these memories are coming back to him about conversations that he had concerning Vera and the conversation he had with Willie Bodega, and he's like, there's kind of like a connection. Like, I wonder if Willie Bodega is trying to circle back to get back to Vera. And then that's the only way that I will like him personally, because then there's the underlying love story and he could burn it all. I don't care. Burn the whole place down so long as you get back to your love. That's the only way.
Love, first love.
Yes.
There's got to be some type of I guess maybe I'm saying that because I'm wondering if Willie Bodega is just the father figure of all of these men, because we haven't really met a father yet. Like I don't think we have. So I'm wondering if like that's the role that he's going to play. I'm curious. I'm curious.
I think Chino had a father. Chino has a father at home.
Did Chino have a father at home?
Yeah, I feel like
be more a big brother. I don't know about a father.
Chino had a father, but I think especially in that era, a lot of young men looked up to the gangsters or the known men there because their fathers were working or trying to hold down the fort or whatever the case may be. But Chino did have a father because I read it in the beginning.
Yeah, he did mention it, how when he was in middle school, his father would side with him, would not argue that he was hanging out with Sapo.
Yeah,
because exactly, because he knows that everyone needs a person like Sapo in the street to survive, who got your back.
But even in that sense, right? Chino's father almost leaves the streets to raise Chino. He's like, yeah, thank God you got that Sapo by your side because you're going to have to fight. And in that sense, he almost like opens up like the door for him to go get into some reckless behavior.
No, I think more is like in a father figure. It's like, to be a man where they live, you can be soft, or you need someone to have your back. I feel like he was more giving him like that advice, not necessarily the streets were raising him, but just the reality, of the streets, right? Like just, so that it's just, you can't function without someone like Sapo on your side. You know, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And fathering was different back then. I mean, that was fathering back then. It wasn't the hands-on, involved every moment, everyday thing that it is now.
Mm.
The fact that he knew about Sapo was saying a lot. I mean, he knew who his son was hanging with.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the movie A Bronx Tale, if you guys ever seen it, where Z, his father was an MTA worker, but yet Z was more gravitating towards the gangster on the block, and he looked up to him because, you know, he had, people feared him. So it was kind of in that same concept.
Yeah.
Had a connection with Bodega if it wasn't for Sapo. Like, he was, you know, he was kind of like, you know, and even Marta says it is, he wasn't even, he was not the least bit impressed by Bodega. And I kind of wish that dialogue about, well, wait a minute, you say you're doing good for the people, but you're selling them drugs. I kind of wish that dialogue would have gone a little bit deeper. Chino was like, well, if they're stupid enough to take my, Bodega was like, if they're stupid enough to take my stuff, then they don't have the right to be in my
great society. Yeah.
Hitler much? My goodness. He's like Hitler with my society. Yo, I'm sorry.
Oh, he's not. Talking about Trump?
That's what makes it complicated.
Yes. Well,
he's complicated.
Yes, and I love the complexity of the characters in the book, and I love the complexity of the storylines, and I respect each character in its sense, in their own little sense. But he really, him especially, he's just like, what he's doing just seems so wrong to me. So I'm just gonna let y'all know from jump, I'm not a fan of him. If y'all didn't know already, and I'm probably not gonna be for the rest of the book unless he gets Vera. And then in that case, maybe.
It's gonna be
you're romantic.
Maybe he was the guy that was supposed to marry Vera, and the mother. Okay, that I can go with that.
Yes,
because I like love stories.
Okay.
You see, I just slumped down in my chair just now, just because I was thinking about how good the love would be. I'm just thinking all about it.
And talking about love, Chino, and I think we were talking about it in the chat. Because again, I'm like, Chino is like, I love that they talked about, Casa Maria talked about in the beginning about the theme being brotherhood. And then, because at first I was like, God, Lord, like, does he want to fuck Sapo? Like, he's like on his dick a lot, right? But then I was like, no, he really just looks at him as like, like a brother, right? But then when Chino is talking to his girlfriend, to his wife, Blanca, and he's talking about how he want to do her up in the bed and her belly and how pretty she is when she's pregnant. And that to me was like, oh, I like this. I like Chino a little bit, but not too much.
I know, I don't like Sapo. I can't take Sapo. I think he's...
Well, especially with that Fisher Price comment, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, he has no soul. And even if his friendship with his
he's immature, but he's just
well, he's immature and he's rude and he's he's awful to his wife, you know. It's just like no respect whatsoever. You know, he knocks on the door any time of the night, he calls him any time of the night, says all kinds
it happens.
He's horrible.
Yeah, that happens.
He's dangerous, he has no soul. And then every time he wants to get a favor, do you remember when I did this for you when we were you know, all this kind of nonsense. What he's friend? I would never call him a friend, not even a brother.
He's very
I would turn around and stab you in the back and run off.
But he manipulates Chino, and that's how he gets over it.
Yeah.
He's very manipulative of Chino, and because for whatever reason, Chino is lacking something that man fills up. And so that's why I said, even though it's not a true brotherhood, in Chino's eyes, that is his brother. He glorifies him.
He defended, remember, when he was in school.
Yes.
He defended him. That goes big. In the good old days,
that
goes a long
and that's what
way.
it's all about,
Yeah, that's the same way. Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
You know, he could do no wrong in his eyes. I mean, and what kind of man is Chino to allow him to speak to his wife in any old way and him knocking on the door. What kind of friend is that? He's awful. I mean,
Well, Chino kind of seems like a follower, though. He kind of seems like a follower. He's definitely not someone who can say no to, even when he asked him to take drugs to his college, he did it, you know? And then he said he wasn't even afraid. He was just afraid of what Blanca would say about it, you know? So he's definitely,
is he a follower? Is he a follower or somebody who feels that he has an allegiance to?
You know the word pana that they use? That word pana is very powerful in the Spanish language. So when you're a pana, that's what you do.
I was actually going to ask, Anna, can you talk about that word pana? Because he uses it a lot, and I'm actually not familiar with it.
That's a close friendship. I mean, it's an old school term.
It's like my homie.
Is that what Marcia is experiencing? What I love them both, but it's the way, it's a brotherhood, you know. So remember they used to be like blood brothers. I don't know. You all
Cut your finger.
We used to cut out fingers and be. I mean, you can't do that after age, but before age, we would do all kinds of things. I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, Ron, can we mute people's mics because someone's mic is open?
I don't know who it is, so.
So pana.
Listen, just 1 second, Anna. So
on the street, or
if
mostly
you have
from the street.
any noise behind you or around you, please just mute your speaker because it's coming through and then it amplifies. So, but yeah, continue, Anna.
Is that a cello in the back, Marcia? It looks like a cello. No, that's what the word pana means. That's the way I'm interpreting it because, you know, I'm in my 60s and I lived through it and I had brothers and, you know, that's a powerful word. It just means brotherhood. Someone who would, you know, give the shirt off your back, you know, somebody like that. So.
I just had a few ideas. This might be crazy, but you know, the whole idea of like loyalty and brotherhood and like, you know, the pana, like, you know, you need that in the street to survive. So for Chino, you know, and Sapo, their relation, like for Chino, he can always count on Sapo because he always had Chino's back in school and everything. So for him, that is like obviously the #1 priority for him. Like he may not agree with everything that he's doing, but he knows that Sapo has his back for anything. And it kind of reminded me like, yeah, like, you know, that's the way to survive the street because you need that kind of loyalty from people. But it also, I've been watching a lot of Survivor, and like, if any one of you are familiar with Survivor, like, you know, for people to get to the end, they need that loyalty. So I was just like, oh my God, that's crazy, you know? But it's like the same sense in the street, like for people to survive and to have that pana, to have that homie that you can close your eyes and you know that you 100% can count on them. So I feel like that's why Chino has that, he still has that relationship with Sapo to, you know, to the end. If they stick, I don't know.
I just wonder, I guess, how dangerous, right, that pana, that brotherhood can be in this environment. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's almost like a tale of two cities, right? You have Chino, who is married, baby on the way, in college. Like, how dangerous is it for him to still honor that honor that brotherhood? Because on one hand, it's jeopardizing his relationship with his family, and on the other hand, it's jeopardizing his relationship in the streets, right? If he doesn't like remain connected to Sapo. So I was thinking about that a lot after I got done with round 5. I was thinking like how much I wanted him just to drop Sapo as a friend, but then I've thought of the dangers that has on both ends of the stick. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Your best friend could wind up killing you. Let's put it that way.
Or
That
having,
when Blanca, oh, I'm sorry.
no, I was just saying,
Okay.
or he could end up killing you or getting you killed.
Yeah, well, that's why when Blanca was telling him what she told him about your friends' friends are not your friends, that kind of felt like a premonition to me. Like, is something gonna happen to him, you know, because he's doing this? And so yeah, that part stood out to me. Like, I felt the envy, like something's gonna happen.
You know what I think is gonna happen, and this is me just predicting at the end of the book. You know how the one that the underdog, you're like, yeah, ain't nothing gonna happen. He's a pussy, ain't nothing gonna happen. He's the one that ends up taking it all in the end. I feel like that's what Chino's gonna do, because he's gonna be the brains of this entire operation. That's how Sapo is looking at him, which is why he looks so disappointed when Chino doesn't bite to this idea of like just watching that street man.
Can
Not,
you
you know,
guys hear me? Can you hear me?
we
What
can
about
hear
the
you.
lawyer? What about Nazario?
Hello?
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 I don't. Who is that talk? Go ahead, Anna. I'm not
I
sure.
was saying nobody mentioned
Yeah, you were
Nazario.
bringing up Nazario. Yeah, and he's
The
a
lawyer. He seems like a sleaze bag.
vicious
Oh yeah,
character, right?
yes.
Yes.
I thought the same thing.
Yes.
I feel like he's the most sinister of them all,
Yes.
right?
And that's what I'm talking about. He's the one with the most.
What about
job.
what?
He's the one with the most.
With the suit.
He
And
has
the-
the legit job, and he is the crook.
I don't like him.
He's the most dangerous one of all.
Absolutely. I 100, and that's why I was actually, you know, it's funny because when I wasn't nervous when Chino was dropping off Sapo's drugs at Hunter, but I was really nervous when he was getting introduced to the lawyer. I said, oh, this is it. Like, this is, now he's crossed the dark side.
And a crooked lawyer has
That's
to
a
be.
good way to describe it. He's on the dark side now.
Yeah. Someone who's going to go through all this education and end up with a drug dealer or a person there can't be anything right about it. You know, it's got to be crooked. Nasty. I don't like him.
I didn't like
Legally,
the lawyer.
I didn't like him.
he's legally crooked.
That also reflects on the Godfather, when there's the lawyer who gives the advice. He's supposed to be the clean front, and he's just as kind of scurvy.
Yeah.
I have a confession. I've never seen
Consigliere. The
You
consigliere.
Consigliere.
Yeah.
What you said, Brendan?
I've never seen The Godfather.
Oh, you're missing out.
It's a good movie.
At least Godfather 1.
Yeah, at least. It's great.
Has anyone read the book of Trump's lawyer, Trump lawyer's book?
No, I listened to his interview.
That would be interesting.
I know all I need to know about that man.
Yeah, I'm curious about something in the book. It struck me that Chino has a serious talent, right? From early on, he's an artist.
Yes.
And the teachers ask him to do murals, and he goes to art school. He leaves the Bronx and he goes to art school. And even when he's talking to Bodega said that he had heard that he is doing these RIP, these rest in peace pictures. Yeah. But somehow it happens in passing, and at least yet, his talent is just totally let go. And I was curious about that.
So you know what? Remember, I linked that to this. Remember in the beginning when he had said that the school that he went to was named after a Puerto Rican poet that was like the most famous poet in PR, and no one knew it, including him, because that's just not what they were taught. They were never taught that they had any artist or that. So I think he thought of his talent doing graffiti not really as an art or a practice, but just as something that he could do.
As most talented people do. They usually, and especially if it's not cultivated.
Exactly, it's not cultivated, especially in the types of schools and
even your own parents, like they don't nurture those dreams.
Yes.
The teachers, like they just want to use you, but get what they can get out of you, but they're not like really pushing it. How many people do we know with like wasted potential, in the sense that could have been someone that did so much great things because of their talents, but it just wasn't nurtured? And that's in the hood, like all day, it's everywhere in all areas. So I feel like that's just it's so common, like it's more common than we even realize. So that's what I took that as.
And also, Miss Andrea, like I remember in the beginning pages when he was talking about his graffiti, I don't know if you remember this, but he said something like, when families would come to me asking to do a mural, I would never ask for the money up front because then I wouldn't get tipped. So I think that had a bit to do with it too. That's just the way he was making his money, and just like survive.
Yeah, and there was a moment where Blanca says that his teachers didn't care about him. They were just taking advantage of him when they asked him to do their murals, and that she didn't see it as them nurturing his talent. She just saw it as the teachers taking advantage of him.
Yeah.
I thought that was all interesting, that in my family, for example, right, if somebody had been good at drawing, right, or at art, I mean, that would have been so nurtured and pushed and encouraged, and I mean that would have been the trajectory of someone's life, right? So it's interesting, an interesting cultural difference that in the Bodega, it wasn't seen as being anything particularly important. That's
well, there was not. In a lot of cultures, it's like, for instance, I would love to be an artist, but my parents, when I wanted to go to college and study art, the answer was like, "Are you crazy? You can't make any money." I mean, especially being a black woman.
Right.
I mean, look, now these days, the generation under us or even under us, they are being nurtured, and which is fantastic. I always nurture folks, but these days, people going to college to go to study art. Well, financially, that is like, especially when they get out with a serious loan, unless they have a major plan, it's a whole different ball game. But in certain cultures, especially around that time, like Blanca is a fine example of that, is that traditional, your parents work so hard, they come to this country, you can't afford to fail, you got to, build up, and you want to be an artist, it's just like, that's just outrageous. There's no way that somebody is going to, sacrifice themselves to come to this country, live like, crap, and then you're going to go to school and you're going to study art, and to no way.
We also have to consider that they probably were first generation Americans or migrated Americans, and so that they probably didn't know the language or have the resources to get their children into those spaces that will cultivate that artistic ability in the child.
But he did go to the special art school. I mean, somebody knew enough to get him into a special art school. It doesn't say, I think, how that happened in high school. But it was interesting to me how that came and then it just disappeared as quickly as it had come.
And now in college.
Art and design, which means he would do a portfolio.
Right.
That's right.
I mean,
it's a specialized school.
It wasn't as haphazard as you might think. I don't think it's a cultural thing that he was Puerto Rican. It wasn't encouraged, because there are plenty of great Puerto Rican artists. And there was also a time of the beginning of El Museo del Barrio, which was El Taller Boricua first. So I mean, there was an arts movement in El Barrio at that time as well. So the fact that he got into art and design meant there was a certain amount of seriousness on his part, and some adult who helped facilitate that. But so I think what that shows, and what I like about the book and the characters, is they're complex, and several people have used the word complicated, and they're not all, they're complex, like real people are. Everyone is not, most people are not all 100% perfect or 100% bad. So that, there are drug dealers who are nice people on one hand, even though they're selling death to their community. There are, so it's a mixture, and I like the way he captures that in the characters. coming from a teaching background, what I love about this book is the kind of conversation that we're all having. Is imagine that taking place among high school students and all this stuff about talking about what is toxic masculinity. That just opens up a potential to have like, really interesting conversations with young people.
There's a couple things, like he didn't actually make money off of his art. He's referring to like how muralists make their money, which I think actually matters to all the points that were just made, because part of where he's at right now, where we've read up to in college, is that like moment of not really seeing yourself as like successful, and those are the questions I think are not being like, you know, they're not written out loud, but it's something that's alluded to based on like what success in the streets looks like, success in an office looks like, success as an artist. And if he didn't hustle like that from younger, even though he knows how it worked, then he's less inclined to have that hustle now as he gets older as an artist. And so I think that that distinction is actually really important, because I don't think he actually knows what it is to make money off of his art. And then in terms of education, I think like the most, like two of the most important standouts from the very beginning, or like important comments that he made, were those about teachers and how you like see yourself and art and all the things he said about friends. But specifically, because I think it's so relevant to right now and just like education and how it's moved over time, it's where he talks about the Italian teachers and the mix of the neighborhood and how these teachers don't even know the history of the neighborhood. So it's like you have multiple cultures that can exist across blocks, but if people aren't interacting and sharing, our histories and the way we're like speaking and dialogue with one another is very different in how we perceive each other and then how we take what people are saying. And so while there were Italians in El Barrio, at this time, these are Italian teachers he's talking about not coming from the neighborhood. So he mentions like they don't know the history of the neighborhood. That's why we have community schools now, because we're pushing for for actual cultural awareness in our education and that agenda. And there's parts where he talks about, he said, so since we were almost convinced that our race had no culture, no smart people, we behaved even worse. Then he also says, we hated the white teachers because we knew they hated their jobs. And he also says about the Latino teachers, like we knew she cared because she never called us names. And also about those teachers, he said, to them, our self-respect was more important than passing some test, because you can't pass a test if you already feel defeated. And those are like the few things that I've always remembered about growing up in the education system, is this perception, like, you know, we went through No Child Left Behind and all these things, but the reality of it was to push test scores and to push schools looking good, not to actually support and nurture education. And so the way he sets up the story is so New York, so about the complexities of existence, and then like these perceptions of self-worth. And yeah, that also leads into, there's a lot of things, like I didn't know when or how to chime in. That's page 6. So I didn't know where or how to chime in, but like on Bodega and the complexities of dreams, I think is also like some of the ways that people have talked about these characters I find so fascinating, because it makes me so curious about all of you and like how you grew up and what you've been exposed to versus what I've been exposed to. Because to be completely honest, I feel like I'm reading a story that is like my life. Like I am so relating to this person, and not in all the things that they're involved in, but like even the way they think about themselves, the friends you have. Like you guys just taught me how important the word pana is. So I told my friend that like he's my pana. And even if that's dangerous, I think like, right, we called it like dangerous too. That's the value of these relationships, and right, all the judgment that comes with who you're friends with, who you're talking to, but how involved are we actually as like families and communities in knowing what's going on in young people's lives, and, you know, not invading and letting people explore. And I feel like that's what his dad did. Like when somebody mentioned like being a father at that time was different, I feel like being a father at that time was also being like, okay, my kid has to see how the world works, because he's not going to get it all from me. And, you know, like, I feel like my parents are like that. Like, my father grew up like that, and my father raised me like that. And then my parents were so a Chino and a Blanca, because I feel like my mom didn't want me to go outside and all this stuff. And my dad was like, oh my God, like, we're Puerto Rican. This is our culture. This is what we do, this and that. And my mom was like, just go to school, become a curator. So even like the exploration of my art career wasn't like be an artist. I believe in your art. It was like, okay, get the job in art that will get you a 401k. So yeah, that was a lot and a little compared to all the things I want to say, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Like, are you seeing the chat? We're all like, yes!
You hit it spot on.
But you know what's so interesting? Listening to the conversations about how we feel about the characters, like whether we like them or not, it's so, for me, I'm suspending, connected to everything that Issa just said, I'm suspending my reaction and my responses to them, because when I encounter the characters, I can't help but think that they are like telling their stories, and they are products of their environment, and they're products of, you know, what they're living. And so I may not, Bodega or even Sapo, like, I can't even say I don't like them. I have to just say, you know what, they're living their personal truths at this particular moment. And you know, even thinking about how sometimes we take on the language of our oppressors, right? And sometimes we carry out the actions that have been put upon us, right? And I think sometimes people are stuck in those cycles, and I kind of feel bad. Like, I don't necessarily feel angry per se. I feel angry towards the oppressors, right, that have caused certain cultures to, or certain people to act out in particular ways because they've taken on that language or those actions of those who've oppressed them. And so I think, you know, thinking about all the complexities that everyone's mentioned, I'm kind of suspending my view of the characters until I get to the end. I want to know more of their stories, right? I want to know more about that Vera and that Bodega love story that Marta is begging for, you know? Like, I want to see if that kind of unfolds and gives us some more information about their characters so we can see how they became who they are, right, in terms of their stories.